Hi, today we are going to be painting a blackberry and blossom branch from a bramble, and that is a tongue twister. So get your kit and let's get painting. Okay, so we've managed to find some very spiky blackberries and the blossom that goes along with a blackberry branch. I couldn't get it all in one because the whole point is the flower turns into the berry, and also we're a bit surprised to have been able to get our hands on some blackberries this time of year. It feels a little bit early, but enough about that. Let's get painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a sort of combination of the two. So we're going to have blossom on one and then we're going to have some blackberries on the other. So I have done a curve with a branch curve and another one, and I'm sure there will be places where we will start sort of doing little branches and things, but this is a really good place to start. So I think I'll start off by teaching you this little blossom flower because it is something we've actually done quite a lot of. So I'll just sort of pop it there for the moment. Okay. Now I'm going to put my little flower, I think, let's have one here and there because they're kind of nice to do. So I'm going to have one that's curving off to the side. Pop those all there for a minute so I can concentrate, and then I'm going to have a round one there. So I've done my pencil, circle and my pencil curve, and then I'm going to do some little buds that are just creeping off the bottom of there. Now the blossom flower, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be brutal and I'm going to pick it off. There we go. So the blossom flower is a sort of very delicate pale pink, and it's also got green creeping in there. So I've got a nice mixture of sap green and green gold, which I think will work really nicely, but I also want a pink. Now permanent rose I do adore, but it's almost even brighter than that, so we'll get a little bit of that fluorescent opera rose in there as well. It's funny, this opera rose always feels like it's way too bright to be anything natural, but it's amazing how it seems to just work against the odds. Right, so I've got myself some pink. I'll pop you to one side, little flower. And let's have a go. So this is a very, very simple petal flower base that then we build upon. So I'm going to use my size 2 rounded point brush. So for the open face flower, I am going to do a pink, very wet pink blob. And then there are 5 petals. I'm going to use the tip of my brush to create the shape, and just with water, with no more colour than what is on there. This is a really, really good technique to make a blossom flower. So just make sure that you draw out the fine line of your brush to get that thinness of the petal, and then you can stretch it out. And the last one, lots of water. You're basically creating a channel. It's very, very pale and delicate, but that is basically what one of these blossom flowers is. And then I'm going to take a very dilute bit of that green and I'm just going to pulse it into the centre there, and that allows that pink to just blend with the green. Now to do one on its side, we'll take our pink and we're just going to use that curve to give us our petal shape from the middle. So I can see one and I can see another coming from the middle, and I can see one more again coming from that anchoring curve. The others are in the distance. We'll worry about them in a bit, but for now I am still going to add in that little bit of green. Perfect, so we've got our flowers in place. Now I'm going to look further down the stem. Now the reason why I put the flower in first is because it's so delicate, and you can see already that it's gone over the pencil. Oh, little hair there. It's gone over the pencil where I was going to pop the buds in, so I need to put those petals in first. And now we can look at the actual stem itself. Now there's a lot of red in that stem, so let's get a little bit of this colour that I mixed a little earlier, which was Cadmium Red and Prussian Blue. It makes this amazing plummy red colour. And then I've got my green just ready to be whipped in at the last minute. Okay, we've also got our little spikes, haven't we? So let's start by painting the broadest branch. And I am going to drop in some green. Now when you're putting two colours together like this, it could go very sludgy very quickly. So when you drop in that colour, you drop it in and you leave it. Okay, let's go for the first one. And then I'm going to bring down some green. It's almost like the green is the gatekeeper up there. It's not letting that red go any further. And then I can just paint in my little green stems for the buds there. It doesn't matter if you get a little bit of blending. You can always just take a little bit of kitchen roll and do that, and then we can fill that in later. Okay, lovely. Now the other thing we need to do is some of these little spikes, and I like to do those whilst the stem is still fairly wet. So I've just got a slightly more concentrated version, and just with my size 2/10 brush, I'm just popping in a few little spikes. And we don't need it to be sort of overly dramatic. We all sort of get the impression that it's a bramble. And then, so I'm just using like the finest point of my brush. And even as we go up into the green, I'm still going to be doing these spikes with the red colour. Lovely. Okay, so now we can start to build our stem further up. We've also got leaves that are going to come into play, so I like the idea. Let's have a little look at this blackberry. Let's have a leaf coming off. Yeah, so got our red, so we're going to build up to that junction there. But I'm also going to give myself a little stem coming off there, which is going to become our leaf branch. So a little bit of green, a little bit of green. Let's keep going further up the stem. And now I'm going to bring some green to come down and meet it. Nice. And then we'll pop in little buds. And that looks pretty cool. So let's get our spikes in. It's also really good to have a look at the real thing when you're doing these little spikes, because they don't always sort of go at the angles you're expecting them to go at, and also they get smaller as you go up the stem. Fantastic. This one looks a bit funny, looks a bit cartoonish, so I'm just going to blend that one in. And then we're going to blend our green down just a little bit. Fantastic. Okay, then we've got our blackberries up the top there, so we're going to start to have a look at how we do these. So I'm going to start my stem coming off there, and then I'm going to start a little branch, just might thicken it up towards the base there. Yep, so we're going to have one little blackberry, I want to say black currants all the time. I think it's because we've got a black currant bush outside in our garden, and we've been sort of obsessing about black currants for a while. One more there, and then one big one coming off there. Now we could do with thickening up the stems a bit more. And we could also do with thickening up this stem a bit more, so we'll get that branch coming out, and this will help just make our brambles just a little less pronounced. Lovely. The colour of the sort of claret stem seems to travel right up to the end with these blackberries. We're going to do a whole thing on how to actually paint a blackberry shortly, but what I want to do is just get these little buds painted in too. So what we do, they're a very cute little shape. They've got a little bit of a point at the top, but we just try and sort of create a little bulbous shape with as few brush strokes as possible, a little bit up the middle. And then I'm going to get a little bit of my shadow mix and just drop a little bit in at the base. Let that take. We'll pop them in, and this is quite good because we have to pop them in here whilst they're still underneath the petals, so we can just create the shape and just leave out where it comes underneath the petal. Nice. Okay, this is looking cool. Let's keep going. So we've now got the matter of a few leaves coming up from the side. So what I would like to do is I'm going to be using a lovely sort of sap green, gold green mix that we've got here that we used on the stem, but I'm just going to mix up a bit more of it so we've got more. But the other thing is the tips of those leaves, the edges, have this claret colour in them. So here's a fun little tip on how to create a shape of a leaf with an edge that's very different. And if you were looking at the watercolour for beginners way back when I first started this YouTube video, you'll know how we do this. So I think we've got one leaf coming on here. I think let's give ourselves another one here. So we start with that stem there, giving ourselves a central line, and then if you want, you can give yourself the pencil line to help yourself along. I'm going to use my largest brush, and I'm just going to create a leaf shape on its side, and then with a fine tipped brush I'm just going to add in some little sort of fine fronds with the red, and then clean off the brush and just blend them in a little bit but that gives us a lovely leaf that's got the serrated edge but still has a lot of the green running through it. Fantastic. So we're taking shape. Let's do another leaf on this side. This one can curve up this time, so we're going to see both sides of it. So again, if you've watched any of the leaf tutorials that we've been doing, you'll know that leaves can be made by using a single shape like this or by two mirrored C curves. Okay. You just want to use the tiniest bit of the claret colour, and you don't want to sort of hang around with it too much, because we don't want it sort of creeping in and blending in too much into that stem. And then these have got little spikes as well. This is a brutal plant. It really doesn't want to be eaten, does it? Okay, that's looking quite fun now. And we're going to be coming back in and doing extra detail over the top with these guys. We're going to do little sepals here. So you see these little green things that are just poking down. We're going to add those in with the green gold as well. And that's just by squishing your brush down and allowing the tip to just finish off the stroke. Really nice. And we don't see them quite so much, but we do see them a little bit coming out the middle. We just paint those in a little bit more manually. It also helps us actually see where these very, very delicate petals are even located, so that's kind of helpful. It's funny, at these early stages of paintings I'm always like, oh, it looks rubbish, but it's always because we're painting broad brush strokes, we're painting loosely, and we'll be getting to nice detailed bits, one of which is coming up now. So we've got these blackberries. Now I'd love to do these blackberries in a sort of range of colours as we see them up the stem here. So we've got the greener ones at the bottom, then the red, and then the full colour. So we'll do a little green one to start off, then a red one, and then the black one. So this is a real exercise in loose watercolour painting. We're going to use the unpainted space to create the shine on the blackberries. And this is how we're going to do it. So I've got quite a largish brush for such detailed work. It's a size 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by painting a little circle with a gap in the middle. And this is with my Sap Green, green gold colour. And then I've cleaned off that brush. And I'm now going to start painting more clusters around it, just using the water and the colour that was already on the page with that first circle, because I want to give the impression that the edges are just a little bit more sort of faded out. And I'm painting sort of semicircles that are just building up the bulbous shape of the blackcurrant. There we go. And I didn't pick up any more colour off that green, did I? But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of that red claret colour and just drop it in around the base. And we've got ourselves a really nice looking blackcurrant. So let's go for the next one. And this time we're going to start the shape with the red rather than the green. Okay. So a little way off from where the stem ends, and we've got ourselves a little circle. I'm going to clean my brush off, and just with the wet brush now, I'm going to start filling it out. That first one we paint, it's important for it to be fairly central because it's one of the most sort of rounded shapes that you're going to paint. So it looks like it was in the middle, sort of front and centre. I find this a really fun and satisfying little exercise to do with the little black currants, because I think a lot of people are quite daunted by painting a black currant. So I think you need to go in all kinds of detail. Okay, nice. And then I'm going to take a bit more of the concentrated version of that, and I'm just going to dab it in around the sort of bottom edge coming from the stem. And it also means you can just sort of tidy up the outer edges if you're not quite happy with the shape. Lovely. And then last off, we're going to do a really dark one. So I'm going to mix in even more Prussian Blue and Cadmium Red. Here we go. Oh, you can see I was a bit naughty with my brush earlier. It's a little bit mucky coloured. There we go. And it's amazing the depth and darkness of the colour you get. But because this is a blackberry, it's really dark and intense, I am going to add a little bit of Mars Black. Just a little bit to that colour. I really try and avoid using pure black, but sometimes in a mix of something else it can be really handy. Okay, so let's start again. This one's going to be the biggest one. There we go, and clean that brush off, and let's create this blackberry. I think when you're sort of painting a cluster of something like this, it's a really good idea to paint the various colours of the stages of growth of these fruits. Otherwise it can sometimes be a little bit dull, I think. So having the green one, having the red one, it's kind of cool. Okay, so just trying to create the shape and also not make it look too much like frog spawn. Now this is a sort of loose approach, a nice simple easy way to paint black currants. Blackberries, Harriet, not black currants. But you know, you could always keep going with the detail and adding a little bit more after it's dried. But I just think this is a lovely introduction to how to paint some nice fruit. And that unpainted space just really gives an amazing shine. How lovely. Right, and now I'm going to get that really dark colour by just creeping around the edge whilst it's still wet. And there we go, we've got our blackberries. I was about to say black currants again. So this is a loose stage, really nice. We'll add in a few more leaves and then we're going to allow it to dry fully, and then I'm going to come back in and paint some detail. So let's give ourselves some little leaves. So I'm just drawing in the curves of those leaves so I know where they are. And we know how to do leaves now, don't we? Famous last words. I bet I'm going to mess this up now. Oh, there we go. Nice and nice. Now I'm doing these 3 in 1 because they're quite small leaves and they're sort of on their side. So I know that I should have time to do my little tips. Before they dry up completely. Whoop, creeping in. There we go. So let's let this dry and then we'll come back in for some detail. We're all dry, so it's time to do the little sepals on the berries. So the sepals that were nice and green on the leaves have now dried on the berries, so we're going to add a bit of yellow ochre to the green mix that we've been using so far. And those are just going to be fairly sort of spindly and just coming out from the base there. Let's tuck in behind the leaf. And last one. And I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow mix whilst they're still wet. Get that to blend down in there. Lovely. The next thing is we need to add a few more spikes to our stems. And you don't need to have a really super tiny brush to do this one, even though I have got one or two lurking in my kit just on the side there. You're still pretty able to do it with, what's this, we've got a 2.0. It's fairly small, but I've got smaller. I just feel like I want to just add the tiniest bit of red to the end of those sepals. It's quite fun. Okay, lovely. And then we could do with a little bit of leaf detail. Now I'm not big for leaf detail, I don't love it, but let's go in. So I've gotten myself a slightly more concentrated bit of the leaf mix, and all I'm going to do is just run a little bit of green up the central pencil line for starters. And then, I mean, the leaves have got long, let's see, they've got some long, straight, very methodical lines, but it's always been something that I don't like to do too much of because I think it can sometimes be the downfall of a leaf. So I'm just going to very faintly do a few. But not too many. Okay, And even with those, I think I'm just going to blend them in a little bit. So that's just going over with a wet brush. Just blending those in a fraction. That one's pretty all right. And then it's time to look at these flowers once again, because there's quite a lot going on in the centre of one of those flowers, isn't there? So we need to get that depicted. I'm going to use some of that ochre green colour. So the first one from the side, we're just going to see some of those filaments. Not trying to paint every single one, just give a sense that they're there. And then there's a bright green dot, a little anther that's called, on the top. So we'll just do a cluster of those that are knocking around there. And that's why I didn't paint those other pink petals in immediately, because I just wanted to be able to pop those in, and we can put those other petals in towards the end. Now for this one, because it's face on, it's a little bit different. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of that green gold with the ochre in, but it's not really going to feature too much. It's going to be much more about that sap green anther on top. So I'm going to get a little bit more of the concentrated version of it, and a little bit more of the green gold. So we've got something a little bit stronger, and then just going to dot in. I always start with a little cluster of halo dots around the edge, and then a few more in the middle, but not too many. Lovely. And now we can do the shadow, which is my favourite bit. So let's have a look. Let's work our way up from the top. So the first thing I would like to add shadow to is those stems at the top. And I've got my shadow mix over here. Might be just out of shot, but it's a mixture of brown and blue. And then, because we've got quite a lot of colours going on in the piece itself, I'm going to just take a little bit of that shadow mix and just add it to some of the colours we've already got to give ourselves a decent shadow mix. So let's start with the stem. So I'm looking for places where it's a little bit overcast on it. And once I've put a bit in, I can just blend it down. It also just helps define the stem a little bit more. Where we sort of made it a bit bulkier there. Add a little bit in. Then coming down that side there. And then we can bring it all the way down. Give that a little bit more. Then we've got our greener stems, so we've got our green mix here, and we'll just mix in a little bit of shadow in there. I've got a little bit of fluff on my brush. And where's it going to go? It's going to be in underneath those little buds and underneath there. It's going to be in underneath there. And I'm also going to use it to just define the actual buds themselves. Because there is a slight sort of almost like a pumpkin feel to these buds. They're quite bulbous. When I've used the word bulbous before, and I've heard Ant editing the videos, he always thinks of the Bulbasaur in Pokemon. So that's for you, Ant, whilst you're editing. I'm going to get a little bit more darkness, just a little bit more concentrated. And just add even more, because sometimes a second layer of detail does the trick. All the while try not to stick your hand in your painting. Great, so this is looking good. I'd like to put a little bit on the green sepals just here. And the ones in here, which is sort of a little bit of a challenge to pop them in, but they need a bit too. And we're very nearly there. We just need to have a little think about whether we want to add anything more to these blackberries, because you could just give yourself a tiny bit more definition. Not too much, mind. You don't want to ruin this because it's looking so lovely already, but just the tiniest bit of colour to give a little bit of an outline just to some of those shapes. But like I say, you don't want too much. I think it's looking kind of lovely. I'm going to use that colour for the red one as well and the green one. Now I'm just going to have one last look over it, and then we can rub out the pencil as well, and you can have a look. Do our petals need anything more? No, I think we're all happy. I think we're good. Okay, so I'm going to rub that out for you, and then we can have one last look at it. So here is my putty rubber, and I rubbed everything out, and you can see how lovely it all looks. And then the last thing I need to do is pop in those petals. So just the tiniest outline, really nice and faint. And there we have it. Thanks so much for watching. There's so much in that tutorial for you to be getting on with. And if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!